Potato Land, where it's like a takeoff on Disneyland. And they want me to say potato land, potato land, potato. It's a weird line, but people like to hear it.
Welcome, friends, fans, and children of all ages, to another episode of GalaxyCon Live, where we are bringing the convention experience directly to you. And today, we are going to the wonderful world of Disney with two amazing guests. So without further ado, let's wish upon a star and bring them out. Our first guest is an actor and comedian whose credits include RoboCop, the Star Wars parody film Troops, and the current voice of the following Disney characters: Pluto, Horace Horsecollar, and since 1987, he's been the voice of the beloved Goofy. Please welcome back everyone's friend, Bill Farmer.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you, Patty.
Oh, welcome back, Bill. How was your year?
It was great, and it's off to a good start. Bret and I just got back from SAC Anime, Sacramento, meeting all the fans and stuff. First one of the year, went really well. Happy to be here today, and yeah, back in the saddle. I'm in my little home studio here. Did a couple of cartoons this week, so onward and upward in 2022.
Absolutely. As I said before, I think we got out of that last tunnel. I think we might be in another tunnel, but I'm convinced this tunnel will be smaller, will be lighter, and we're going to get to the light at the end much quicker than the last one.
Yeah, and I'm already set up, so it's no big deal for me.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we all got our supplies. Well, Bill, absolutely glad to have you back in good health and good spirit.
Thanks.
And next, he's an actor and illustrator who is presently the Walt Disney's most recognized and beloved character in video games, animation, and media. Please welcome back the voice of Mickey Mouse, Bret Iwan.
Howdy, Patty. Hey, Bill.
Hey,
how are
Bret. How are you, young man?
Oh, I'm good. I can't complain. Like Bill said, we're off to a good start this year. And yeah, all good things.
Oh, absolutely. I'm digging the stash, by the way.
Yeah, looks good.
Thank you. Yeah, I
look like I drew mine out.
It's a little divisive. But for those who don't like it, I say it's not your face, so I don't really care what your opinion is.
It's just for you and your other half, and I think that's about it.
Exactly.
Well, Bret, welcome back. Gentlemen, welcome back to the GalaxyCon virtual stage. So glad to have you here today, and I'm told we are good to go on audience questions, so I say let's just go ahead and dive right on in. And our first one comes from Dante, who wants to know, what was your favorite cartoon character while you were growing up?
Yeah. Okay. I'll take that one first. When I was a kid, I grew up in a little town in south central Kansas. There wasn't too much to do, so I remember actually seeing cartoons at our one movie theater. On Saturdays, they would show double features like horror movies from the 50s and all of that stuff, Three Stooges. And usually it wasn't Disney, but it, as you might imagine, but Warner Brothers. So I really grew up mostly with Warner Brothers, Mel Blanc characters. Of those, my favorite, which I've gotten to voice in the movie Space Jam, was Foghorn Leghorn, because he's a big old chicken. And it's just the writing was incredible. And I love the style of animation they had.
It's amazing when you find out that Mel Blanc did all those characters. And then when you become a voice actor, it's even more mind-blowing when you realize he did all those characters.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But
he was an incredible voice actor, and probably kind of like the major for my generation. Definitely he was the best well known because no one else ever got their names on the cartoons, so it was very tough to figure out who did the voices. But Mel had a thing with Warner Brothers where they put his name in the credits at voice characterizations by Mel Blanc, and so everyone kind of learned him, and hey, we knew one name, and that was about it back then.
And Dawes Butler was usually the second one if you're a fan of animation.
Oh, and he was my mentor when I first came to California in 1986, and I would credit him with any of my success because he taught us that we can get into it later more in depth, but it's all about the acting. It's not as much about the voice, as you can tell. It was all about the acting.
Absolutely. So, Bret, who's your favorite growing up?
Well, believe it or not, Patty, my favorite character growing up was indeed Mickey Mouse. I know, shocker to those watching. I did, though, have a brief stint where I thought Mickey wasn't cool enough, and so I would tell people that Donald was my favorite character. And you know, a lot of my opinion of those characters was based on drawing the characters, because I love to draw them from a very young age. And of course, Mickey is what I started drawing. But then when I started getting a little bit more fascinated with how the other characters were drawn or constructed, you know, it was a little bit more challenging. I remember thinking, oh, I like Donald better. And then when I started drawing Goofy, I like Goofy better. And I went through a whole Aladdin phase and, you know, all kinds of different characters. But Mickey at the heart of it was always my favorite. He was always a tried and true. So, yeah, it's not a cop out. Mickey was indeed my favorite character growing up.
Absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. And it's kind of nice that you could be a part of your favorite later on growing up. It's not everybody can say that.
It's not half bad the way it's shaped up for me. For me.
I think so. And Dante, thank you. That was a great opener question. What do we have next? Here's one from Alex. What was everybody's what was everybody's most interesting job you'd like to share before you came into voice acting? I'll phrase it like that.
What was yours, Brett? I'm trying to think of mine.
My very first job was actually at a McDonald's in a small town in Illinois that we were living in at the time, called Leroy, Illinois. Hired at I was 14, and so I was a little bit young to start working, but I got my first job at McDonald's, and then after that, I started working at a pizza restaurant. So that was very early.
Were those the McDLT years?
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I worked through the whole Beanie Baby craze.
Oh wow.
I can't think what other obnoxious McDonald's promotional periods happened when I was there, but you know, all I remember from that experience is at the end of my shifts, I would be able to ice skate through the parking lot to my car because my boots had so much grease on the bottom of them. I would just kind of like slide to the car. It was, you know, a little dangerous.
I know exactly what you're talking about from my times. A couple of times I spent in kitchens. Yes, you did. Yeah, you could. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, let's see. Mine, I'll just do it post college because that's really kind of when I started my career. I never really talk about this because it takes a long time to explain the whole thing, but I was a puppeteer, believe it or not, my first job out of college. I went home from University of Kansas, where I got my degree. My doctor in my little hometown mentioned to a patient who was living in Hollywood and worked for a magician by the name of Mark Wilson, who was also in the 80s. There was a show called The Magician with Bill Bixby. He did all the magic, Mark Wilson, but he had a show going around the country, 5 different shows, 5 different cities, talking about like ecology and stuff in school systems. And it was free to the school. But after the show was over, we went out and we talked about the puppets and gave away free hamburger cards to the local Burger King. And
sorry, Brett.
I know.
I knew that I wanted to go to Hollywood and said, there's this kid that wants to go to Hollywood. And so they called me. I flew out from Kansas to Hollywood to find out about this. And it was the Burger King Royal Puppet Theater, sponsored by Burger King. And the puppets were made by the people that made all the costumes for Disney. It was a taped show. The tape was the Burger King was the voice of Casey Kasem. The Burger Queen in the show was June Foray. So I didn't even do the voices on that. But they said, okay, you'll be doing this show in New York. They sent me to New York. I trained for about a month. And I did all 5 boroughs, Southern Connecticut, in a Royal Burger King puppet van for about 6 months, going to school systems and doing this puppet show. They moved the show to Houston, did it 6 months there, to Dallas, did it 6 months, got out of there. And I left the show at that time and went into local radio, where I was in radio for a number of years. And then for about 5 years before I got the role of Goofy, I did stand-up comedy. So a very weird variety of different jobs, but they all kind of added up and helped me along the way to getting the audition and landing the role of Goofy. I didn't know it at the time that it was training me, but it was. Wow.
So you worked with June Foray a lot earlier than people might have expected.
Yes.
That's I now I want to know what the Burger Queen looked like because yeah. All right.
Picture, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Paul, producer Paul, see if you can find some images from that. We have some fun checking that way. And Alex, very fun question. Thank you. Hey, what do we have next? Here's one from Brian. What is your favorite Mickey or Goofy project that you have done to date? Or I always preface it, one of your favorites.
You want to take that one, Brad?
Sure. Yeah, it's like Bill and I have worked on so many things over the years. You start to almost lose track, and then you think you have a favorite, and then another favorite comes along. But for me, I think anytime I get to work on something that's in the theme park, so a castle show or a parade or anything like that, those are always really exciting to me because so much of the work we do for TV shows, it's all behind the scenes, and we don't really get to see audience interaction. But when you do a theme park show, thankfully we get to get ourselves down to the theme parks, either Disneyland or Disney World, fairly frequently. And when you're there, you get to actually be in the audience and watch these experiences that you're a part of. And so you get to see the engagement of the crowd and how people react when the characters come out. So that never gets old for me. There's a great castle show in the Magic Kingdom right now. Fantasmic has always been my favorite project ever, and I got to work on that for the Disneyland reboot. So yeah, I think anytime there's stuff at the theme parks, it's always pretty special.
Yeah.
My answer is kind of similar in that it was we don't get a chance to meet the public too much. It is behind the screen, behind the scenes, and just you got a script and a microphone. That's about it. But I would have to say overall, not in the making of, but in the reaction by fans to a Goofy movie, because that came out in '95 and it is still popular. And every Comic-Con that I go to, the fans always come up and people will say, that's my favorite movie. I couldn't talk to my dad, but that movie brought us together. And that's really heartening. So from that standpoint, a Goofy movie, from actually making it, that's hard to say because there's been, hundreds and hundreds. It's, thousands of shows probably over the last 35 years.
Yeah.
And, but if it's not, I love my show Amphibia that is on Disney Plus, where I play a character named Hop Pop. I love doing that because I love the scripts. And sometimes the younger shows, we don't get that much out of it because it's written for 5 and unders.
Yeah.
And so, we love doing, and a lot of them are still very funny. And when we see them on television, that's what they meant, because you kind of pretty quickly. And we work alone. So I'm just doing Goofy's lines and then going back and doing Pluto's lines. And we don't really get a sense of the show until we see it completed, which is about a year later. So all in all, I would have to say, if I had to put my name on one, it'd be a Goofy movie.
I think that would be the one to do it. Yes. And I'm envious of both of you guys because I've done some work for the attractions as well, and I've done announcements. Unfortunately, all the ones I've done were the showdown announcements. Yeah. So I don't get it. So if I heard my voice, it was like, oh, the show's.
The people are like, oh darn, that's not.
Yeah, I know. It's like mine was the voice of "We're very sorry. Come back later, maybe." So, but great question. Thank you for asking that one. What is next? From James. What is your favorite memorabilia that you own?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I've been certainly from a Goofy movie. I've got a couple of production sales. That means a lot to me. Some posters from even before I was doing Goofy, from the classic era in the 1930s and 40s. I got 1 or 2 of those. But a lot of times it can also be very heartwarming to get something from a fan. I got an Annie in 2014 for our Mickey Mouse shorts, Goofy's grandma. And one of the fans, I don't know how he did it, but he kind of got the cells or from one of the scenes. It looks like they were from production cells. I don't think they are. He may have painted them, but it was beautifully put together and it's hanging on my wall. So some of the fan art is really good too. And I appreciate that. But probably like a lot of scripts, and I'll go over old scripts from time to time, like to a Goofy movie or even earlier. And those are definitely a lot of keepsakes because they bring back great memories.
Do you have any old notes or
Oh, yeah.
annotations in them and stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, especially on a movie, you rewrite things, or you'll say, okay, I'll put in, I think this is more of a Goofy line, or he'd say it this way, and I'll throw that in. And sometimes they say, oh, that's better. Other times they say, no, we'll go with the way it was written. So you never know. But those notes are in there.
Yeah. Those are always fun to see those. Definitely.
Awesome.
So Bret, what you got?
Memorabilia. Well, I mean, I'm definitely a collector. I love anything vintage. I'm trying to think. Like right over my shoulder here is a Haunted Mansion attraction poster. That's an original silkscreen that hung at the entrance to Disneyland. So that's, you know, I love that one, and it gets lots of compliments. People often assume it's just a reproduction, but it's the real deal. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then you can't see them, but I'm looking at. I have a couple original production rough animation drawings. One is from Society Dog Show, which is the Mickey Mouse and Pluto cartoon. I want to say it was 32, I think 1932. And then the other one I have is a Mickey Mouse short that was incomplete actually. So animated in the 50s. I can't remember what that was called, but it was essentially Mickey was a composer and he couldn't come up with he was having like a downtime, and he met this bumblebee that was this Mozart. And so yeah, you can go on YouTube, and I wish I could remember what it was called, because you can actually find someone went and photographed like the rough animation. So those are pretty cool. I love the Society Dog Show one, because I think, God, back in 1932, that's some legitimate Disney history back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, definitely. And out of curiosity, I know you're a big train aficionado. Do you have anything that's a pride of your collection from that part of your hobbies?
Oh, I mean, I have plenty that are non-Disney related. Actually, Bill just gave me a really nice gift not too long ago. It's a Lionel train set from, I think it was 94. Is that right, Bill?
I think it was around that. Yes. I'd originally got it for my son, but he wasn't into trains, and who better to have a train set than you?
Yeah, so it's a fun little Mickey Mouse and Pals Lionel train set. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, I get geeky. I have a spike from the Walt Disney World Railroad that putzes around the bookcase every now and then. So yeah, and I think I even got I've got buttons from the Disneyland Railroad, like conductor outfits and all kinds of stuff like that.
Nice. Very nice. Great. James, great question. Thank you for that one. And what do we have next? From Gene, besides animation, where else can your character's voice be heard?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, character's voice. It's actually a great question, because I often say, as big of a Disney fan as I was, I had no idea how often these characters get used and in what capacity. So other than the TV shows, we already mentioned the theme parks. That's one. But for Mickey does a lot of toys. I am always constantly surprised how many toys. We were just visiting some friends yesterday who have a little 1-year-old, and his little playpen is littered with Mickey Mouse toys, and you press them and they all talk. There was a Mickey, there's a Minnie, there's a Goofy, and they all talk. So tons of toys. We do a lot of video games. There's a lot of apps and audiobooks nowadays. I got to work on the Apple Watch, actually. You click on it and Mickey tells you the time. So yeah, it's constant. Bill, you got any more to add to that?
Oh yeah. Let's see. For Warner Brothers, like I said, Space Jam, did some of their characters. Robot Chicken, I've done a lot of characters. In a lot of different movies. I was in the ADR groups on some movies that most people don't know that I was in. Beauty and the Beast, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Toy Story, Toy Story 2, Bugs Life, Monsters Inc., Monsters University. More recently, some Illumination movies like The Lorax, the Grinch, Sing. I was a dog reporter in Sing. So yeah, my voice gets around, and probably 20 some other movies of just background voices in live action movies. I got a check the other day for I think about 3 cents for a movie, Mom and Dad Saved the World.
Oh yeah.
Some background voices in that. you know, there's a lot of them. I have to check my IMDb to figure out what I did because I can't. Sam and Max was one of the earlier ones. Sam and Max Hit the Road, or you know, Freelance Police.
Yeah.
And early, you know, bunch of stuff, commercials, you know.
By the way, Bill, I don't know if you've seen them, but they just released some Sam and Max action figures that are superb.
Oh, I have not seen those. I should get those.
I will send you the link.
Thank you. Yeah, I got a nice picture of Sam and Max signed by Steve Purcell, who created them and did the comic books, and that was fun. So I was Sam's first voice in that first before they went non-union and that kind of stuff. But it was a great character and great games because they were like really well written.
Yeah, very much so. And for those of you old enough to see R-rated films, Bill can also be seen in the film RoboCop.
Yes, I'm the only guy didn't get killed. So
yes.
And that was before I was doing Goofy. I recorded that just a couple of months before I got the audition, about 5 months before I got the audition. And I lived in Dallas at the time. And yeah, I'm an on the street reporter. And when I shot, it was about 1 a.m. It was about 95 degrees. Peter Weller was, you know, in the RoboCop outfit, and he was dying from the heat. And they were blowing air up his sleeve after takes. And yeah, I decided, why should I be out in 95 degree, wait around 7 hours to get on set when you can go into a studio and an hour later you're done with animation? I thought it was a good trade.
I think you found the good fit. Absolutely. And yeah, that's absolutely a good point about I hadn't really considered all the toys and stuff like that, which is great for you guys because keeps you busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Gene. It was a great question. Hey, what do we have next? From Annie. Who was your biggest supporter growing up?
That's interesting. If I didn't really have much of a supporter for that until I got into stand-up comedy. My parents thought, no, it's too risky to go into show business. You know, they were much more traditional Midwestern kind of thing. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, that kind of thing. Hollywood was a million miles away. No, there's much better ways to make a living. And it is an incredibly competitive industry. And so they were right in that. And there's no guarantee. But I went along with these other kind of peripherally showbiz careers, but never getting really out to Hollywood. And it wasn't until I was doing stand-up and some of the stand-ups would say, yeah, you really got something. I think you should maybe, with all the voices and stuff, go out to Hollywood. And so it was an agent I had back in Dallas who really said, you know, you should give it a shot. I know I'm going to lose you as a client, but you should go out to Hollywood and see what happens. So I came out here, left my wife in Dallas at the place. So I commuted for nearly a year while I got an apartment out here, was able to get an agent. And luckily, about 4 or 5 months after getting here, had that great audition that changed my life forever. So it can happen. It's not guaranteed, but it certainly wouldn't have happened if I hadn't tried.
Yeah,
absolutely. There you
go. Let's see. For me, you know, I do have to give credit to my parents for being a pretty substantial support system growing up. Even though they didn't know I would ultimately end up being a voice actor, they were always very encouraging of anything creative. You know, I've mentioned that I love to draw, and that was actually my first career pursuit, was to be a professional artist, an illustrator, an animator. And my parents were supportive of that very early on. I remember my mom always talking to any art teacher and kind of saying, like, what can we do to help Bret, you know, get a little bit more experience, or other after hours classes. And they set me up with a community program here in the Pasadena area where I was going to after school art classes. You know, art school is not something that a lot of parents support. Like Bill said, it's, you know, all too common to pursue a more lucrative or a stable career. But my parents were all for art school. They said, go for it. Now, you know, when it came to the time where I had told them I auditioned to be the voice of Mickey Mouse, there was a little bit of hesitancy there. You know, I remember my parents saying, do you even do a Mickey voice? You know, my mom thought I did a better Donald Duck voice, which I've never attempted to do a Donald voice. So I don't know where she got that from. And my dad, you know, I was working at Hallmark Greeting Cards in Kansas City, Missouri, and I had a full-time salaried retirement job that I'd been at for about 5 years at that point. And so for him, and I think probably most parents would have this opinion, he was like, "Are you sure you want to leave this stable job for something you know nothing about?" And he was, you know, he was right. At that point, I truly didn't know a whole lot about voiceover because I hadn't done it professionally yet. So, but nonetheless, they still were, when I ultimately was offered the gig and made the choice to pursue that, they were supportive, and you know, they're extremely proud, and two of my biggest supporters to this day. And you know, my dad, who was a little bit apprehensive of me doing it, eventually changed his email signature to say Bill Iwan, the voice of Mickey's dad, or something to that effect. So, yeah.
It's always nice when they come around.
Yes.
Absolutely. Annie is a wonderful question. Thank you. What do we have next? It is one from Joe. What was your first audition like for Goofy and Mickey?
Well, we have two totally different experiences, don't we, Bill?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Mine was just after, as I say, after I moved to California, I was able to get an agent. And then about 4 months later, and it was in December of 1987, or 86, actually, at the time. And they said, "Do you do any of the Disney characters?" At the time, there were several people doing Mickey, Donald, Goofy, because they weren't on television as much as they are now. They really, it was kind of like, you want to do it? Okay. It was like Goofy du jour, really. And they hadn't, since the original voice passed away in the late 60s. So 60s to the middle 80s, they really didn't do much with the characters. They were starting to do more, and they had the advent of the Disney Channel then on TV. And so you might see an old movie, a new cartoon, something from the parks, and all the voices sounded different. Roy Disney and Michael Eisner decided, let's have a big audition to find the best voice for each of these main characters. So I said, well, I kind of do a Goofy. My Donald isn't very good. My Mickey's not very good. And so I got a cassette tape of like Lonesome Ghosts and Boat Builders and all old Goofy cartoons to just match it and do a little singing and everything. Just laid that down at my agents. You never know what's going to happen. About a month later, they said, hey, they would like to use you for the voice of Goofy in an upcoming project. Now, you don't know if it's just 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, or forever. They don't come and say, you're now the official voice. No, not at all. So I did a show. As a matter of fact, it was January 23rd. So in just about a week, it'll be my 35th anniversary of doing the voice. And it was called Disney's Doggone Valentine, a DTV show, which was DTV was a takeoff on MTV where they did mashups with current songs and old cartoons.
Yeah.
And I had to say something like, gosh, I put my foot on the gas and I'm out of here quick. But I had to do it 2-picture, like to the old cartoon. I'd never done that before. I was absolutely terrified to go into the studio to do that. And we got through it pretty good. It didn't do that great a job because the words didn't really match the animation at all. They didn't seem to care that much. About a month later, they called and they'd like to use me again. That was the only inclination that I was ever going to do it again. And I did another DTV thing. And that was cool because I got to work with my very first celebrity, which was Gary Owens. If you remember from Laugh In, the following program, and we did that NBC opening with a peacock. And we were sharing a mic just right next to each other. And it was so cool. And he said, the following program is brought to you in living color. And I said, in stereo on NBC. And that was the second time I did that. And I went home and said, I got to work with Gary Owens. He's so nice and everything, and off and running. Then about a month. And then when the series Goof Troop came up, then I had kind of a steady job doing this all the time. And then record albums and stuff. And it just kind of took off from there. And now 35 years later, still doing it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm a big Gary Owens fan, so
he was so nice.
I believe it. So, and Bret, of course, you had a very, very, very different evolution.
Yeah. So my very first audition for Mickey was actually not even like a standard audition for voiceover. It was over the phone. So what I auditioned for was to be an understudy for the, at the time, voice of Mickey, Wayne Allwine. Some conversations had happened at the studio. It was decided that it was a good time for Wayne to potentially mentor an understudy that would eventually take over. And so that's really all it was. And because they had gone, it's my understanding that they had kind of gone through the typical voiceover channels through agents and whatnot, and they weren't getting a great response, or they weren't finding what they wanted. I guess you could call him our boss, one of our bosses at Disney. He's the SVP of character voices. Rick Dempsey decided, hey, you know what? Traditionally, the voice of Mickey Mouse has just happened to come up through the studio ranks. You know, Walt Disney, Jimmy McDonald was working at the studio when he took over, and Wayne Allwine was actually working at the studio when he took over for Jimmy. So they said, let's just cast the net and see what we can find within the studio. So they put together an audition, sheet with some lines. They included an MP3 that had samplings from Walt's cartoons, and then they had some Wayne as well. Emailed that out in an internal email to the studio, which included Pixar. Well, I have a friend who I went to school with, who is an animator at Pixar. So she got that email, and she knew how big of a Disney fan I was. And she knew that I did the voice of Mickey, an impression at the time, because when I was around friends in high school, almost to kind of beat them to the punch of making fun of how big of a fan I was, I'd say, oh boy. And so people knew that I could do Mickey's voice. And then, in college, we had annual passes and we drove up to Disney World. We went to school in Florida. And who doesn't go to Disney World and talk like Mickey? Wow, look at this place, everybody. So my friends knew I did it, and that's why she thought to send that email to me. So I got this email. It outlined this audition process, which was literally call this number, leave a message, leave your audition, and then hang up and wait. I think there was explicit instructions like, do not call us, we will call you, because they were anticipating a high volume of auditions. So I did that. I waited. Eventually, it was probably a month after that, I got a phone call that said they were looking to do in-person auditions. They'd whittled it down to their top 10. At that point, though, they wanted to do in-person auditions in the Disney studios. And so they asked me, what part of California are you in? Again, assuming that it was somebody who was already working for the company, since this was an internal email that was sent out. So at that point, I had to explain that I was in Missouri, not so close to their studios. It was eventually decided that, they'd love to have me audition if I was willing to fly myself out there. Of course, I bought the ticket and flew right out. And then, so I guess you could say my second audition was my very first time in a recording booth. And that audition was, again, just kind of more, they call it a voice match a lot of times in the industry. It just wanted to see how close I could mimic previous recordings done by Walt and Wayne and Jimmy. And then also they gave me some scripts to just do cold reads to see how I reacted to direction. And how I could, I guess to make sure I could actually do the voice outside of a phone, a pre-rehearsed phone message. So, it was a very unique audition. I've since come to learn not the standard way of doing things. I'm very fortunate that they heard something they liked on that first message, which was enough to get me out to LA to do it in person. And then from there, they liked it even more because sadly, Wayne passed away during that whole process. So it went from being an understudy situation to being a recasting, which was not what anybody wanted to happen and not what anybody was anticipating, including myself. I was really looking forward to the chance to learn from the man who had done it for 32 years. But it didn't work out that way. And so I found myself flying out from Kansas City every couple of weeks to work on projects. And it kind of was an extended audition at that point. Like Bill said, they weren't saying, you're the official voice. It was just kind of, we have some projects, come on out. And the next week when I got the request to come on out again, I thought, well, this is good. And then after 2 sessions is when they did sit me down and said, we'd like for you to be the guy. And I think that conversation was necessary at that point because it involved me relocating. It wasn't a situation of I could just go down the street to record when they needed me. I had to make a big life move. So, I guess you could say that's when it was made official for me. But yeah.
I want you to be the guy, but I'm sorry. I got a Father's Day card season coming up.
But I was ready to leave the seasonal greeting card world. I never knew when Christmas really was, because in my mind it was, June.
Yeah.
And then you'd go out to the stores and be like, where are the Christmas trees?
I think it's another really telling to your instincts about, when they said like give you notes and they wanted to see if you could take direction, which I think is it's the other half. It's one of the third, I think, of the job, meaning, okay, you got talent and you got your actual technique that you've learned, various other things. And also it's important in there about, can you figure out what the director wants, which may not necessarily what they're saying, but do you have that empathy of, okay, I think he wants to go down here.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of interpretation that has to happen there, and like Bill's already mentioned, I learned from him, and I will join him in being the first to tell anybody who's interested in voiceover. It's about acting, but the other part of that is part of the acting process is being able to be responsive to a director, a vocal director who knows how to steer your performance to best fit the product that you're working on. And if you're not receptive to creative constructive criticism or direction, that can be very detrimental to any acting career, but especially voiceover.
Very much so. Very much so. Joe, great question. Thank you for that. And let's go ahead and roll another one. And here's one from Matt. And you need not say this in character voice, but do you have a favorite line that you have ever recorded?
Oh my gosh. That's really tough because, hundreds and hundreds of shows. There are some that are requested of me to say, sometimes by fans at Comic-Cons, like from a Goofy movie. I remember the line, "How many cups of sugar does it take to get to the moon?" And I had to do that probably 20 some times. And I think they took take number 2. It was like, okay, we get the right intonation, the right feel. That's one that seems to be requested by fans. Also in one of our Mickey shorts, Potato Land, where it's like a takeoff on Disneyland, and they want me to say potato land, potato land, potato. It's a weird line, but people like to hear it.
Fair.
Yeah, the point about people requesting lines is a good one, because you do lose track. I think something I get asked to do a lot is a line from Kingdom Hearts. May your heart be your guiding key. Or people also seem to like, did someone say the door to darkness? Which I'm not sure I understand why, but okay, I get asked to say that a lot. And then I think I feel like a broken record because I say this at almost every interview, but Fantasmic being one of my favorite shows, I actually practice doing Mickey's voice by saying, "Some imagination, huh?" So I think that's still, when you're in Disneyland and you hear that, I still get goosebumps. So I love that line.
That is a classic. And those are your most requested. I won't ask you what the strangest thing was you've ever been asked, because that will probably put us into the abyss.
I don't think we have the legal backing to go down that road.
No, not at all. We just say that fandom can ask for some interesting things. But thank you, Matt. Great question. Well, we have next from Daniel. If your Disney characters could team up with characters from another universe, who would you choose and why? Paul, that's a fandom mashup, and let's roll the graphic.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we get various this questions so often. We made this too, and plus it gives you guys a few extra seconds to think about it.
I wasn't thinking. I was too busy looking at the video, seeing what's going to happen.
I've got an answer here. Actually, my son gave me this. This would be a good mashup. It's Goofy as Darth Vader, and Max as I guess as
Luke.
And so, I'm your father. Yeah, that'd be a fun mashup to do.
Absolutely.
I actually think I did, and I can't remember the game that I did it. Emperor Palpatine in one of the very early LucasArts Star Wars games. So I have been in that universe, but I couldn't take Goofy along with me.
There you go. There you go.
Trivia thing.
The Star Wars universe is a good answer. I don't think we work on them so much anymore, but back when they did what was they called? Star Wars Days, right? Down in Hollywood Studios in Florida.
Oh yeah, Star Wars Weekends.
Star Wars Weekends. Thank you, Patty. Yeah. I recorded a few times for that. And Mickey would kind of just come out, and I know he's dressed as a Jedi, but he would do his typical lines. And being the Star Wars geek that I was like, can we please throw in some Star Wars quotes here? Like, I want him to walk out and meet Darth Vader and be like, "You may dispense with the pleasantries, Commander."
That'd be fun.
That kind of stuff I think is great. But I don't know if this is considered another universe, but I think it would be really cool to have the Fab Five interact with the Muppets. I just think if it was like a live thing on stage that we could perform, we could join the Muppeteers and do that. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's
not so much a crossover as I don't know what you would consider that, but
it has been interesting. I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been a little bit of experimenting with that, or building a bridge in that, and maybe someday.
Yes,
I would greatly love to see Kermit and Mickey.
Mickey, cool. Right?
Mm-hmm. Kermit and Mickey. I pair Gonzo with Goofy.
Yeah,
I think their energy would definitely match.
Actually, I did on one of the Disney cruise ships. I was with Bill. Name escaped. It does Peppy the shrimp, and he was and we were on stage.
Beretta, right?
Huh?
Is it Bill Beretta?
Bill Beretta, absolutely. Yeah. And I got to sing we as Peppy the shrimp and Goofy the I Can Show You the World from Aladdin. And Goofy was Jasmine. So that was a definite weird mashup, but it was a lot of fun. I think the audience really enjoyed that, and it's fun to do it live in front of a group.
A lot of people don't realize this, but the Disney Cruise Line has a little more latitude, and they tend to have some more experimental shows. Like, we had this idea, we're not sure let's test it out on the cruise line, and then we'll see how we can translate it over into the parks or even other media. So there you have it.
Yeah,
all right.
Do for some fun things.
Absolutely. I think we have, exactly. We have time for one more question. Let's see if we can go out on a really fun one. And this comes from Jane, who wants to know if you could have both Mickey and Goofy be contestants on a game show, past or present, what would you like them to be on?
Well, Goofy's not married, so it couldn't be Family Feud. Let's see. Instead of America Says, maybe Disney Says. I don't know. That'd be good. A trivia thing, and Goofy would just totally fail.
I think Mickey and Goofy should be on Double Dare together, the old Nickelodeon show, or maybe the whole gang needs to go on The Amazing Race and see how that goes.
Cool. That'd be cool.
I could see that turning into a big mess real fast.
I think Double Dare, I think, would be really good because Goofy would just immediately say, like, physical challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
He wouldn't even bother with the question. He just want to do it. But again, those challenges are so wacky, he would actually have a penchant for coming out of them on top.
Yeah, he'd probably win through some weird thing.
Yeah, Mickey would probably know the answers, but yeah, there you go. Jane?
I knew this one.
Yeah, exactly. The Treaty of Ghent. Jane, wonderful question. And gentlemen, as always, been an absolute pleasure. Any final words before we take our leave?
Well, thanks for joining us, folks. And I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope we were able to answer most of your questions.
Absolutely. And Happy New Year, everybody.
Gentlemen, as always, been my absolute pleasure to serve you. Once again, thank you for joining us on the GalaxyCon virtual stage. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and thank you for your great questions. Hope to see everybody again soon. Until then, bye-bye, take care, and remember, smiles are free. Spend them often.